Welcome to Freedom Fastlane. I'm Ryan Daniel Moran, and today we're talking about being a man. No, really, we're going to be speaking with Jordan Gray. He is a relationship coach and someone who has been fascinated with the polarization between masculine and feminine energies and why that causes attraction and how that affects our lives. This is something I've been studying for years and is probably why I have such a deep voice and so much hair on my body. The masculine-feminine polarization is something that's extremely important for us to cover in today's society because in the last few decades, men have been becoming more and more feminine and women have become more and more masculine. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but that does have effects on society. And today, Jordan and I will be talking about what those are, and if you're a man, how to bring out your masculine in order to be more productive, more effective, more tenacious, more successful. And if you're a woman, how you can respond and also support your man in the best way possible. This is fascinating stuff. It's going to be an introduction for those of you who have never been exposed to this before. So enter this call with an open mind. There's only so much we can go into in a 30 to 40 minute call. So have an open mind as you're going into this call with Jordan Gray. Hey everybody, this is Ryan Daniel Moran and welcome to Freedom Fastlane. Today I'm humbled and excited to be joined with someone that I consider an incredibly close friend and a mentor. He's somebody who has inspired me, coached me, and somebody who is changing lives around the world. He is a best-selling author. He is a top relationship coach, and he is really, really good at causing shifts in people. If there's something that you're wrestling with, if there is a new goal that you want to attack and accomplish, if there is something that you feel is preventing you from getting there, Jordan Gray is the guy who can help you create a shift so that you feel pulled towards that goal, so you're in alignment towards that. He's awesome at filtering out the junk that's holding you back so that you have a clear purpose and road to success. He's also a good friend and someone who has inspired me. So Jordan, I'm really excited to be featuring you today.
Ryan, thank you for having me. That was an amazing introduction.
Well, thanks, Jordan. I mean, we're personal friends, so
Yes.
I obviously have a history with you. But for those of you who aren't familiar with you, why don't you take a little bit to talk about why you're awesome and why people should be listening to you?
Sure. So you can find out more about me at jordangrayconsulting.com. I've been basically a relationship, intimacy, and life coach for the last 5 years. I've written 3 books. 2 of them are bestsellers on Amazon. And yeah, I think that you said it best. A lot of what Ryan just said. I second that.
Okay. Well, Jordan, a lot of people who listen to Freedom Fastlane are entrepreneurs. A lot of them are lifestyle business owners, and they desire freedom. Our big mantra is to live the life that you desire, to live a life of purpose. But for a long time, I struggled with purpose and wondering, what should I be doing? And I felt really held back towards the goals that I wanted to achieve. So a lot of people listening, they wonder about their purpose. They wonder about what's my gift to the world. So for those people who are in that spot, who don't know their mission or their passion, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, it's a question I hear a lot, and I seriously hope that one day one person just makes like the perfect product that like points you to yourself and is like, here's exactly what you need to do, and like here's the blueprint for it. And I'll attack this question from the thinking and feeling level because both are very important for men. And I feel like a lot of the time, masculine thinkers, men especially, are very drawn to just kind of logicking their path or purpose into a corner and only thinking about it and never feeling, never using their intuition as well. So the first point I would say is, first of all, just be intentional about it. Like chase it down and capture it. Don't just think, oh, it'll like float into my life one day if I just, if I just sit and meditate for 10 hours in a room, it will become crystal clear and it'll be there. Look at what kind of books you're drawn to or that you read on the regular. Who in your life are you jealous of? Are you listening to this podcast right now and you are somewhat jealous of some aspect of Ryan's life. Pay attention to that. That kind of envy, that feeling of jealousy is so important because that is something at your core that you want in your life. Whatever you're perceiving in other people, you want that as a part of your mission. So it's important. And the last one would be, what did you dream of doing when you were, 6, 10, 12, 15 years old, when you were younger, but you kind of let go because, oh, that dream is silly. That's not something that I could actually do in real life. For me, for example, I was a major theater kid all the way through high school. 13 to 17 years old. I was in every play, every musical. I loved it. And I didn't want to chase being an actor because that wasn't really the part that I loved, but just being in front of people, which Ryan, I know you can empathize with. And that was, a huge part of why I fell into relationship coaching and teaching in general, is that being able to teach groups of, 10 to 100 men in a room was so validating and so freeing. And I just, I knew that had to tie into my purpose. And so when I was back in front of people in a coaching aspect, that was, infinity times more addictive than just theater because it was something that I cared about, something that they were resonating with, and it just used so many of my strengths all in one moment. So for the people listening, think of all of your greatest strengths, how you could leverage those, and just the thing that if I already had $10 million in the bank, what would I love to be doing right now every day? What would make my blood feel like it was just coursing with electricity, just totally on fire?
You said something to me in private once, which was finding yourself is you'll have to give the exact quote, but it was you said finding yourself is like sliding into a mud pit.
Right.
You don't have to force it to happen. You just allow it to happen.
Right, exactly. And this ties in perfectly to the masculine conversation that it's a very male brain thing to do to want to perceive this journey as like climbing a mountain. And you see it as this upward thing that you have to slog your way through, and your heels are blistered and you're in pain and you're dehydrated. And it's not about getting to the top of the mountain of finding this summit and then having it all come clear to you. But exactly, it's like looking up towards the top of the mountain and just sitting down and sliding backwards down the hill into the mud. Like you really have to wade through some of your, I don't know if I can swear, but your crap and like really realize, no, this is who I am at my core. It may not be pretty or socially acceptable or like whatever the thing is, but like this is what I really need to do to feel fulfilled every day.
I think there's a shift happening right now with men because for a long time there's kind of been this definition of what masculinity is, of what a man should be. And now we don't have so many of those restrictions because we have so much freedom and opportunity in today's society. And we're kind of relearning how to do that. And as a result, we have questions like, what's my purpose and my mission? Which really 50, 100 years ago, I'm not saying nobody struggled with that, but you kind of had a pretty clear linear path. You went, you got a job, you got plugged in somewhere, you provided for your family, you made babies, and you went to church and you served your community. And that was what was expected of you 75, 100 years ago. Now that we have this freedom and opportunity that's so abundant, we kind of have to rediscover ourselves. And I think that we're kind of in this transition period where those questions are a little bit muddied right now. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really cool book called The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz, and he talks about kind of what you were just touching on there, about how when we have fewer options, it's like, oh, would you like this burger or this burger? It's a lot easier to make that choice, and that is largely what it was 50 years ago, or maybe 50, 80 years ago, where yeah, you grew up and you had one of maybe 5 sexually available women in your town to date because you didn't live in this mega city of millions of people like we do today. Or you could be a welder or a banker. Like there were very limited options. And research has shown that when we have too many options, we get overwhelmed and it takes longer for us to make a decision. And we also oftentimes we end up being less satisfied with the choice that we do make because because you said there's so much abundance of choice.
Yeah.
That yeah, definitely it is a more difficult process to make, but still essential.
Now, I went through this myself through a really difficult time, but I would like for you to address for both men who are going through it and women who have men going through it or will have men going through it or sons going through that difficult time. What effect does that have on a man when he's unsure about where he's going next or what his purpose is or what he needs to do next? What does that do to a man and what can he do about it?
Great questions. So, what does it do to a man? It drains him. We, masculine thinking really doesn't enjoy feeling stuck or caged or uncertain. It's actually the exact opposite of the masculine energy because masculine energy is directionality. So, it's the male penetrating force in every element of the universe that says, okay, this way, we're going this direction, we're going there, come hell or high water, we're going to push through this and get to one place. And so, spinning around in this kind of chaotic state of uncertainty, it drains you a little bit more each day. And so, what can we do about that is, kind of touching back on the path and purpose finding, is you get intentional. Even if you're making the wrong decisions, it's so much better for your day-to-day mental health if you just make a decision
Yeah.
and it turns out that it's the wrong one, because then you're still learning. When people say like, "Oh man, I wasted the last 3 months like chasing
No.
this revenue model or this thing, and I just feel like I completely wasted it, and like now I have to like start all over." And I say, "Did you learn anything from this experience?" Like, "Yeah, I'll never do that again." I'm like, "Perfect." So you didn't waste anything. You learned something very valuable. You learned what it felt like to feel frustrated and feel pissed off in that state, which that in itself is a learning curve. But tying that to, okay, well, I'll never chase that again, or I'll modify it this way. There's no wrong mistakes unless, or yeah, the only wrong choice is not making a choice,
Yeah.
which even in itself is making a choice of not deciding. So try something, and I always picture kind of like the layers of an onion peeling further and further down to your core essence. And, that shelling is just losing a layer of something that isn't you, and that's healthy, that's good for you.
Yeah. I've noticed in my life, yeah, I tend to doubt myself or find that lack of purpose if work isn't going well or if a relationship isn't going well. And if I don't have something else that I'm supplementing it with, I tend to fall into that negative emasculine place. So the way that I supplement that is I stay really, really uh, rigorous and scheduled with my workouts, or I stay
Yep.
really, really focused and intentional about my relationship with a certain person. And I always feel like I'm growing in my workouts because I can add more weight, right? Or I can be intentional about some area in my life that's growing to have momentum and direction in. So I feel that pull, I feel that drive, even if there's a certain part of my life that's lagging.
Yeah, exactly. And the masculine thrives off of challenge. So that makes complete sense that you would go to, okay, well, you know, I'm not really smashing out these barriers right now, so what can I be
Yeah.
growing in? And and yeah, like you said, it's very, one thing that people don't realize often is that the masculine, not just in men, but the masculine in everyone, really prioritizes path and purpose and mission almost above all else in their life, whereas the feminine in everyone prioritizes love and intimacy. And so, men generally can stand not being in an intimate relationship much better than most women or
Mm.
most feminine minded people can. Whereas, a lot of my girlfriends in the past, and and we've talked about this, and some of yours as well, they might not understand fully how much our career path and how much our mission means to us as men. And it's really like, it's point number one. If that's not in place, you feel like in this wishy-washy, out of integrity kind of place. And it's, like I said, it's very draining for the masculine.
I want to reiterate that because I want to make sure I understood what you said because it really resonated with me. What you're saying is that men put as much value and get as much drive out of their mission and purpose as women do out of love and intimacy. So if women really wanted to understand men, if they're going through a hard time, that is the comparison. It's love and intimacy, having a relationship for women. That's priority number one. And for men, it's purpose and mission. So if a man isn't clear on his mission and his purpose, it's the equivalent, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's the equivalent of a woman not feeling loved and being intimate and in a relationship.
Exactly. And I'm using man and woman for simplicity's sake. Really, I should be saying masculine-minded person, feminine-minded person, because they can live in either gender. But yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. That the masculine-minded male prioritizes path and purpose over love and intimacy, and
Wow.
we go into that further. But that's basically how relationships balance each other out. Is that the feminine reminds the masculine, hey, like don't just 100% chase your goals and mission. Don't forget to live. Don't forget to like slow down and cuddle with me sometimes. Whereas the feminine learns from the masculine, that time isn't infinite and that life will end. And so if you have dreams, chase them. We kind of put that directionality into their lives and we help them be more penetrating with life. So we both learn from each other in different ways.
We've gotten pretty deep pretty quickly. So let's
Yeah,
back up just a little bit for people
sure,
who aren't as into this stuff as we are. Why
sure.
don't you give people a little bit of an overview on the difference between masculine and feminine energy? Why don't you define that for people? Because this distinction changed my life. Getting this
Nice.
distinction and understanding the difference, not right away, but once I really started to play with it and understand it, I
Hmm.
really saw the world differently once I understood the difference between masculine energy, feminine energy, being okay with being in both energies at different times in my life, and watching it play out in my relationships, in my interactions, and it's impacted my business, my romantic relationships, my friendly relationships, everything. And I want people to be able to understand this distinction. So could you provide that for people?
Sure. And I think you touched on it there a little bit, but it's almost like the secret language that exists in everything around us, but like you said,
Everything.
but no one talks about it or knows about it, or very few people do either of those things. And yeah, so some of the value will be from hearing about it right now, and then I think a lot of the learning comes from after kind of knowing the general framework, seeing it everywhere in action and going, oh wow, it's actually
Yes.
everywhere around me.
Yes.
So it's one of those things that appreciates with value over time. So masculine and feminine energy. So some differences here. I'm going to keep going back to the yin and yang symbol. Everyone that like black and white swirly thing that you've probably seen in like hippie style marketing somewhere across the world.
Sure.
So when we talk about masculine and feminine, it's not an either or 100 and 0 continuum. A balanced masculine and balanced feminine each have 20% of the other. So a lot of the men that I work with, especially the ones that are very entrepreneurial, very driven, but need help in relationships, they're often closer to 100% masculine with no balanced feminine, and that's not a healthy place to be. And this is actually where a lot of kind of the however you want to call it, masculine feminine polarity swings have balanced out over the last couple of decades. Is that in the 70s, everyone depolarized and went from very masculine, very feminine, strict gender roles to women burning their bras and joining the workforce, and men growing their hair long and going to men's retreats where they got in touch with their emotions. And it was a healthy and necessary step. But now, as you mentioned off the top of the call, we're coming to this kind of new definition of masculinity where we find it more difficult to connect with our grandfathers because we live in very different generations. And so the masculine, being kind of 80% masculine, 20% feminine, is largely, again, coming back to directionality. He's assertive, intentional, very penetrating about his life. He's a problem solver. He is a provider in every sense of the word, emotionally, financially, sexually. Um, and mature masculinity is the key distinction. Wants what is best for the tribe and society
Mm.
at large. So, I'll be the first person to, I don't know if it'd be admit, but in my biased opinion, I think that a lot of the world's problems right now are from not masculine energy, but a derivative of masculine energy, which is boy energy. A lot of the problems come from things like greed and selfishness and victim mindset.
Mm.
and things that are a boy-like phase. They're not a man-like phase. They're not mature masculinity. They are kind of underdeveloped boy energy. And so that's an important distinction, is that it's not, the destructive masculine energy that's just out to mess up the world. If it was mature and self-aware, it would be just as, nurturing and creative and helping as feminine energy would be. Am I still answering the question? I feel like I've gotten off topic or too deep again.
We're good at that, getting really deep. For
Yeah.
somebody who had never heard, you just did a really good job of defining what masculine energy looks like.
Yeah.
Why don't you step one step back
Okay.
and explain exactly how that energy is? It sounds a little bit woo-woo.
Yeah.
We're talking about masculine, feminine energy. Okay, you freak, you hippie, what is this?
Yeah.
Explain that in layman's terms, because I see it every day in my interactions. I see it play out. I see what happens when balance occurs, and I see what happens when you have, you get into an argument with a romantic partner and she steps into a masculine role, and I watch myself get angry and then we clash.
Right.
Whereas opposed to if we stay in our roles, I stay in one energy, she stays in the other, and we reach conflict resolution. So I
Right.
know the importance, and I don't want people to miss the distinction of exactly what it is. So for somebody who's saying, okay, you hippie, this sounds
Yeah.
really woo-woo, explain it to them.
Okay. Masculine energy is a straight line, and feminine energy is a tornado. Or masculine energy is a boulder, a huge rock, and feminine energy is the ocean. One is very kind of static and stoic and penetrating, and masculine energy just gets things done. It's the thing that tells you to write a to-do list and then tick off those things and feel accomplished with every time you cross one out. Whereas feminine energy is the energy that has you write down the to-do list and then makes you question why you're writing it out in this format, or why you're doing this task in this way, and hits it from maybe a more productive or more creative standpoint. Like, it's more flexible energy.
Okay, and how do they play out against each other or interact with one another?
They complement each other very well when used, intentionally, or
Right.
just from a kind of healthy, balanced mindset. And I used that example earlier of each one teaches the other energy something very vital that kind of keeps it from self-destruction. So, for a lot of the, I'm guessing, masculine listeners to this podcast, it would be that kind of nurturing energy from your girlfriend or wife or partner that, she walks into the room when you've been working on your computer for 12 hours that day and your retinas are burning because you're tired of looking at the computer, but the masculine in you is just so stuck in the on position that you don't want to take any downtime. And, your girlfriend comes up behind you and like kisses you on the neck and closes your computer for you and says, come to bed. Like, it's that nurturing, flexible energy that says you don't have to just strive all the time. You can also be content and enjoy the moment now.
Yeah, we've talked about this privately, but I've lived alone for most of my young life, and I've been in that masculine of drive, and I burnt out really fast.
Absolutely.
And I happened to move in with a wonderful woman this year, totally platonic, and even that, I feel like my life is so much more balanced.
Absolutely.
Because I go into my living room and there's a decoration there that I would have never thought of, and yet I feel somehow more balanced because it's there. And she comes home and she's all flowy and
talking about her day in such a like off the wall way,
yeah.
and just like telling these stories that you're barely connecting with, but it's just like it's a spectacle to even be witness to. You're just like, wow, this is not how my brain works at all.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing romantic about it, yet her energy makes me feel so much more fulfilled, and I'm so thankful for her and the compliment that she plays in my life. And she feels the same way. She watches my drive and my purpose, and she goes, "Wow, I feel so inspired by this." And she
Exactly.
feels filled up by that. And that even though there's nothing romantic about our relationship, we still feel really complimented and really fulfilled. And then when I started seeing someone recently, it was even that much more. I felt that feminine energy balance me out even that much more. And I think I told you this story privately. I remember being at a girl's house recently, and she was making me dinner, and I was playing with her cat. And I looked up suddenly, all confused, like something was terrible was happening.
Right.
And she looked around. She's like, "What? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I said, "I just realized that I'm not thinking about work." Which for the
Yeah.
first time in months, I wasn't thinking about work because I felt like I had this just new energy that allowed me to cut off, the really driven straight line focus and just be present for a moment.
Yeah, it's so important. It's like you've been a car just like driving 100 miles an hour for years, and then this thing distracted you, and it was like, hey, you should slow down and fill up for gas. Like that's what that
Yeah.
fullness was that was brought into your life. That you're like, oh, I forgot about that, but that makes total sense, and this feels really good.
Yeah. Now, some people might not quite understand what we're talking about because we've talked about the polarization that existed 50 to 75 years ago, where men had a very clear, direct path, women had certain expectations. And we don't have that so much anymore. Today, women are more encouraged to be career minded, to have children later. Men are more encouraged to be in touch with their emotions, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I would actually say it's probably a good thing. But there are
Amazing, yeah.
there are effects of that because women are becoming more and more masculine, men are becoming more and more feminine. And I'm curious what you say the effects on society are as a result of that.
Sure. So, yeah, again, when you said men are becoming more feminine and women are becoming more masculine, just to keep it clear, I don't think that, 100% masculine isn't turning into 100% feminine, but we are balancing back into that 80-20 more balanced lifestyle. And yeah, I think it's an amazing place to be. And I feel like a lot of it, it's kind of been nature and nurture, but a lot of it has come from the fact that, 50 years ago, we lived in a very uh, building and doing and striving economy where it mattered more what kind of buildings or cars you could create physically than the ideas that you came up with. Whereas now we live in a very creative thinking ideas economy where a lot of, again, more feminine balanced energies bring a lot more to the table.
Interesting.
And I also see that in the way that marketing is done. Several decades ago, people, or maybe even 20 years ago in early internet marketing, um, you could really use kind of public trust and you could just like make a killing financially and leave. You could just do these like one-off major pushes and, launch a product and then not really need to build a relationship or use anything of your creative mindset, but just go and make a killing and then run. Whereas now, at least from maybe my biased perspective, I feel like a lot of more conscious marketers, guys that actually like, or people that actually build relationships long term, they are much more community minded. They are much more open to doing guest blogs and doing podcasts and interviewing other people. It's not just, I have to get the entire market share and like screw everyone else. It's much more community minded, which again, community minded energy is more feminine energy compared to just a dark side of the masculine trait like self-serving, selfish energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
understand.
then,
I understand what you mean. Yeah, what comes to mind is like the dot-com boom. It was all about
yep,
let's go big and sell and make all this money and run. And now we
exactly,
don't have that anymore. It's more how do we serve each other and how do we build something lasting.
exactly.
Yeah. All right. So for people who are listening, most of the people who listen to Freedom Fastlane are business owners or want to be business owners, and we've talked about purpose, we've talked about mission, but they're not quite sure what to do next. And what was big for me in my shift was understanding my masculine energy and how to tap into that. And
Yeah,
so I'd like for you to identify what are masculine things that bring out that drive in us, that make us want to go achieve and conquer and build. And how can we tap into that when sometimes we don't feel that way?
definitely. And I love the question because that in itself is your masculinity only speaking to me. Because this comes up in all my conversations because my clients are primarily male. And the male mind is always saying, okay, like ideas, it makes enough sense, we can move on, but what do I do? What is the action step? Whereas to the feminine, just talking about it, not endlessly, but kind of talking about it in circles sometimes, that's fulfilling because that fullness is what they're looking for. So what can we do to tap into our masculine energy? So I mentioned a couple things already. Again, making more decisions. Even if it feels like, oh, this could be the wrong one, it probably will be the wrong one, but you'll still be learning something. So, figure out who exactly am I? What are my unique dance steps in every interaction that I bring to the table? What are people frequently asking me for? And, knowing, okay, here's who I am. Where am I going in life? And then what kind of even tiny decisions can I make that might point me more in that direction? Again, masculine energy is directionality. So having preferences and making decisions, whether they're the right ones or wrong ones, doesn't matter. Just choosing, just making any decisions will grow you. I often say, if you want to live more, make more decisions. It grows everything about you. So, chase down new experiences. Be intentional about your life. If you feel like you need to build challenge or self-efficacy into your life, maybe go on a 2-week-long solo vacation where you don't plan anything. You just go and have to figure everything out by yourself along the way. You'll get good at making decisions pretty damn fast.
Yeah.
You've done that.
Yeah, I have. It's a great experience.
It's fun and it's scary and you grow and it's challenge, but it's very, very fulfilling for the masculine. Um, Another one is, you've already touched on it briefly, is going to the gym. It was actually, I think it was Richard Branson who said in an interview, someone asked him, like, what is the key to your success? If there's one thing you could tell everyone to do to be as driven and successful as you are, what would it be? And he said, work out.
Wow.
That was it. He said, just go to the gym, just exercise. And I totally believe that, not just because it stokes the masculine fire in your belly by challenging yourself, but you see a very clear one-to-one ratio of, I put in effort here and I see results. You don't necessarily see it day one. You might feel it day one because you're sore, but over a couple of weeks you go, oh, my choices have led to my back being stronger or bicep being visibly larger. Whatever your goal is, just seeing my decisions have tangible results in the real world is very satisfying to the masculine.
Yeah. This makes total sense to me because I totally get off on the idea of when I make a decision and step into something, things change. It's like the universe is water, right? I step into something, it wants to go around me. So I get intentional about something and results take place. And I love that. And the more I do it, the more I desire it, the more I want to go towards it. I had never thought of that as a masculine energy thing, but it makes sense now that you say it because it's clear in business, it's clear in dating. I want to go talk to that girl. I go talk to her, I get her number, now we're on a date. I want to go work out. I do these curls, now my bicep is, almost visible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's funny. Even in your tonality and you talking about it, and also feeling my current heart rate, even talking about drive and directionality and masculinity, we're like, oh, I want to go to the gym right now, or I want to write a new book, or whatever the task is. It's it's stoking that fire right now, even talking or hearing about it.
So would you say that momentum then is a masculine thing? Like that idea of being in motion and like moving towards something, is that a masculine thing?
Yeah, yeah. That's I've never thought like that, but that would definitely attribute to masculinity.
Yeah, because I know I feel the worst. I feel the least amount of energy when I just perceive everything as standing still. I'm not growing, therefore I feel like I'm dying. Whereas even if I'm growing in some area, I feel like a freaking man.
Yeah, definitely. And that makes even more sense because the way that the masculine sees the entire world is kind of in this in this time-based map or grid. So even the word momentum is a very masculine concept because to the feminine is always extremely present-minded. Like, cats are feminine, whereas dogs are masculine. And cats don't think about their moods in terms of, oh, well, a few months ago this happened, and so that's still kind of trickling into my mood now. No, they're just extremely present. So yeah, momentum is a very masculine idea, because if I'm feeling like this is a string of successes, then by definition, I'm thinking about things that have happened in the past, things that are happening now, and things that I'm projecting for the future. So yeah, definitely a masculine mindset.
All right, great. So when a masculine minded person starts doing these things that make him feel more masculine energy, what types of changes happen in him or her?
In terms of their physiology, their lifestyle.
Yeah, in their lifestyle. When somebody starts being more decisive and starts tapping into, let's just say, tapping into their real energy. When a masculine person starts tapping into their true core masculine, or if a feminine person starts tapping into
Sure.
when they start heading in those paths and just being who they are and allowing that energy to come out, what types of changes do they experience?
They feel more grounded, more certain of themselves, less shakable. Um, a way that I see this playing out in a lot of my male clients is that when they don't feel connected to path and purpose, they don't have, a career path that they're really stoked on in the moment. They're very susceptible to, fluctuations in their mood, or, they could approach a girl, try to get her phone number, and if it doesn't go well, it really shakes them up and it really bothers them, because they aren't really tied to their core self, which again, the masculine really gets a lot of validation from being connected to their purpose. So when they are connected to that, you just feel more solid. You feel like, instead of an ice cream cone, or like an inverted pyramid, you are the pyramid, where your base is so wide and so solid that nothing can push you over, because no, here I am, I'm me, I'm living my life, I'm living my message, or my brand, my whatever you're
My
putting out into
truth.
the world,
Yeah.
my truth. And you just feel much more solid, and yeah, you are yourself much more.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people listening feel like they listen to my podcast because they're interested in experiencing the freedom to be themselves, the freedom to wake up when they want